Hey, football fans, we're talking roster cuts and the season finale of Hard Knocks. Stay tuned.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Final episode of Hard Knocks. These 5 weeks have gone by so quickly. If you guys want to talk to me all about Hard Knocks or football or anything that you want to talk about, you can tweet me at Lyndsey Wegner. That's LYNDSEYWEGNER. Here we are in season 11, episode 5. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, MVP of the season. In my opinion, it's like a toss-up between Jameis Winston and Gerald McCoy. Like, these two guys, in my opinion, have made the season. They made it fun. They made it exciting. They were very charismatic, show so many leadership qualities and great talent. And let's talk about this week's episode and jump right in, since Gerald McCoy opened the episode with the Friday fight song in the gym while the strength and conditioning coach looked on and said that Fridays, when the guys come into the gym, they get their fight song. And Mike Evans goes in there. All the guys go in for their Friday fight song, and Gerald McCoy gets his groove on. We also saw him later in the episode when all the guys were out. Well, some of the star players were out for a fancy dinner at Charlie's. That if he wasn't a football player, he wanted to be an actor. He says, we got to be in shape all year round. And these actors, they just have to get into shape for a movie whenever it comes out, which I can't 100% agree with because they still have to look good year round. But he said that he would be an actor if he wasn't a football player, and he definitely has at least the comedic timing to do it. And the guys were kind of making fun of him, saying, well, you can't be serious. You could never play a mean character. You're just too funny. You laugh. And they're all kind of picking on him, and there's no way that I can't see him playing a mean character. Although, like we saw a couple episodes ago, he does want to get beat up by a superhero because he wants to have fun fighting off superhero and crime. And obviously we know this was cut week from the 90 to the 53 players, and the people that were on the bubble last week, we were kind of seeing already kind of some foreshadowing of who was really going to get dropped by the team. And this final preseason game against the Redskins was their last chance to really show what they could do. It was between Riley Bulla and Cameron Lynch, and we've got Dye and Bobo Wilson and McNichols, all these guys trying to make the team, LaFau, and really seeing whether or not they could solidify their positions on the team. And we get a little bit of backstory on Mike Evans and his family and what it was like growing up for him. He donated to J.J. Watt's charity for Hurricane Harvey in Texas, and he actually said that he was potentially going to do an event, but he grew up in Galveston and in a household with domestic violence, and his dad was actually murdered. And we hear his kind of story, and he's talking about the tattoos that he has and what they all mean. And he said he really wants to show his wife and his two daughters what it is to be a good, honest man. And that was something that I didn't know about his life or his family and stuff. So it was a tender moment. And I always feel like Hard Knocks really, really does a great job of bringing you in, still keeping things lighthearted, but getting you invested in these players as you watch for the 5 weeks. I mean, these are players that, as I was drafting for fantasy football this last weekend, I wanted Mike Evans, I wanted Deshaun Jackson, and I felt like every time, like the turn before me, whoever was drafting right before me in the snake draft picked up at least 5 or 6 times players that were next in my queue. And so, anyway, really nice to see that side of Mike Evans. And another interesting part was Jameis talking about the Dirty South and what states actually consist of the Dirty South, and how Florida's actually split, because if you're in Miami and stuff, that's like Chicago or New York with beaches. The Dirty South, these are the players, and they have a different, not ethic, but potentially different passion or drive for football. You're good at it, and that's why you're playing, or you're really passionate about it. And he says people in the South are super passionate about it. Now, I can't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not passionate, because they are, but I do feel like there's a lot of players coming from the northern states that are just as passionate about the game and wanting to play and work hard to make the team. And I know at Green Bay, we are one of the few teams that the players start and end their careers with the Packers. We have like the highest percentage of players that start and end their career with a team, because we're a good franchise to play for. Once again, we're owned by the fans. I say we because I'm obviously a Packer fan, wearing my Packer green today. But it's, you've got to have the good fans, and Packer fans. There's no fan like a Packer fan. And we get Game 4 against the Redskins. LaFau is really having a lot more luck on the field than he seems to be having in practices and in meetings. He's really got to study. And, Jameis was trying to give him, a little pep talk and say, you just got to work. And his mom even makes fun of him when he pulls his helmet off and has like a cut on his nose. And to be perfectly honest, he was getting taken down and hit a bunch. So the offensive line wasn't really protecting him as much as they should have. And McNichols missed a block, which he got hit on. So, I mean, it wasn't completely his fault that he didn't have time to develop the play, although he did have a couple really nice passes, including one to Bobo Wilson, who actually the touchdown got brought back because he was tagged, had contact, so it got brought back. But Jameis Winston was so excited for him. And he did throw a touchdown to Reedy at the end of the game, but they couldn't clinch the win. They lost 13-10. But we also saw Riley Bullough and Cameron Lynch forcing a fumble. And, Bobo Wilson doing a punt return and getting some good yardage on that. So we saw a lot of the players trying to get those positions. And McNichols, once again, just making these mistakes that he's seen and that he's done over and over again. And he's not learning from them. So it's almost frustrating to watch. And I can't imagine the amount of pressure that's on them. And this is the final game. They know this. But crazy to have that thought process. And we get the Friday meeting with Cutter, and they're starting to make these cuts. And he said his hardest position to talk with is the quarterbacks. It means so much to him. And he says, he says this later on to McNichols, but if I'm yelling at you, it means I care about you. I want you to make the team. When I stop yelling, be worried. So he does end up cutting LaFau. They say they only want 2 quarterbacks. And we do know that Griffin is on injury reserve and may potentially come up later on, but Fitzpatrick is taking the backup quarterback position. And I give a lot of credit to LaFau for the way that he handled it and went gracefully. And obviously nice to see when somebody is a mature adult about the whole situation. And this was a big topic of conversation this week, was Jason Licht talking about that he hates cut day so much he would rather travel cross country with Skip Bayless in a heated car with the metal windshield wiper going back and forth than have to make these cuts. And I mean, Shelton Quarles having to make the phone call, that is not a position or job that I would envy in the slightest. And obviously, as they go through years and years of being coaches and being part of a team, I don't think it ever gets easier, but gosh, that job must just not be fun at this point in time. And usually, like we said last week, the cuts happen throughout the last few games, and this was just, you cut 37 players this week. So we saw it all happen, and so you've become more invested in the players, hoping that they'll make the team. And they do let 5th-round draft pick McNichols go, but say that they want him for the practice squad, and they just want him to develop more as a player, and he'll be able to do that on the practice squad. And he said he wanted to stay in Tampa, and something about it just wasn't sitting right with me. I knew this was the foreshadowing, and when Saturday came, I was getting notifications for all the players that were getting cut. So I knew these guys were getting cut and picked up by other teams and going to practice squad and whatnot. And it was interesting to see then it all play out actually in the episode versus just reading about it in my, Google. And they do call Dante Dye. He gets let go, saying that missing time those first 2 weeks, those first 2 games was probably what hurt him, but that he's a great player and he has a career somewhere to just keep pushing for it. And I really liked him. So to see him go was disappointing, and to see Bobo Wilson, who was in Miami and wasn't there and wasn't going to make the meeting that they wanted to make with him, and to say, well, you have to be here by 1:00 tomorrow. And, it just seemed kind of disrespectful. And we've seen the attitude in the last couple episodes. And even though he played a great game against the Redskins, that I just, as a coach, would you rather have that attitude? I mean, you have to back it up then. If you're going to be like that, you better back it up with skills and speed and making the play. And I would need to see him step up in order to keep him on the team, because I'd rather have somebody like Dye, who is 100% in the game, loves the game, wants to play, is in it to win it there, than somebody who's got a poor attitude about the whole thing. And they do say, could this be the straw that broke the camel's back? If his attitude doesn't change, they will let him go. But he does, they want him to join the practice squad. Auclair, our Canadian tight end, makes the team, and Cutter has kind of a nice moment with him, saying that, you are a professional now. You beat out so many people, and you're 1 in 1,700 people to make the team. And he gets a little teary-eyed hearing this. And they're deep on linebackers and tight ends. And while Cameron Lynch makes the team, Riley Bullough does not. And they tried to trick us a little bit throughout the episode. And this was the first notification I got for Tampa Bay was Riley Bullough on Saturday. But they try to make it look like they're not going to cut him. And then they eventually get to the phone call with him and have him come in. And he's happy to be on the practice squad and to work his way up. And Bobo Wilson on Sunday shows up just in time to sign. And Licht ends up finding out that McNichols is conflicted and doesn't know what to do, because the 49ers have offered him a position on their practice squad. So they need an answer from him. And he does eventually decide to go with the 49ers. And Licht is not happy about this. And he said, he got his feelings hurt because they took him out of the game. And if he's going to act like that, then they don't want that on their team anyway. And that's kind of the way that I feel with McNichols being from California. It makes sense to me to be on the 49ers, to have a fresh start for him there, and to be on a California team. It just makes more sense than him staying with Tampa, because he seemed salty about the whole situation. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bobo Wilson does change. I don't know how that contract is when they sign with the practice squad and how they get released and whatnot. But I know that they're ready to bring somebody else up if he does not want to, continue with that position. And the final scene is the coach removing McNichols from the depth chart. And final moments are little bloopers. We've got Marpet saying he knows it's cheesy to be on the beach with his, ukulele, which we called out a few episodes back. And, really McCoy and Baker being the comedic relief the entire season, and having that, funny side when things are getting serious or when coach is yelling. And I felt like this was a really great season. I liked it so much more than the Rams last season. I just thought the team was in better spirits and more talent, which I think we'll see throughout the season. And I keep seeing a lot of articles talking about the fact that they could be Super Bowl contenders and what it would take for them to get to the Super Bowl. And I think they have a lot of great talent on their team. And if Jameis can really connect and make the right risks, then they do definitely have a chance. And obviously their game against the Dolphins was canceled due to Hurricane Irma coming in. So they're going to be playing that game later in the season. But I read an article where Coach Cutter said that They're looking at Jay Cutler like he's Joe Namath and like he's the greatest quarterback of all time, which is very interesting. I don't think that Jay Cutler's a bad quarterback. I just think that he didn't have the time to develop the plays in Chicago, and it'll be interesting to see him with Miami. And they're just trying to, make reference and say, we got to play like you are playing the greatest quarterback of all time. Like you are playing Joe Namath, whether or not Jay Cutler is or not, which I don't think that he is. But we'll be seeing that game later on in the season. You guys, these 5 weeks have just flown by, and I thank you for joining me each week here at AfterBuzz. Talk about Hard Knocks, to hear what I have to say, to share your opinions as well. If you guys want to talk to me throughout the football season or keep in contact, you can find me on all things social media at Lyndsey Wegner. That's LYNDSEYWEGNER, or my blog, lyndseywegner.blogspot.com. I am commissioner in our fantasy football league, and there is some potential development for some sort of show. It's an idea that I'm working on, so maybe we'll see you guys in some other outlet. I look forward to talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy football season.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.